The following video has been brought to you by RYN Studios. Release your nerd.
Hello everyone, my name is the King of Clubs and welcome to another episode of List It. In this episode, I'm going to be counting down my top 10 favorite classic movie monsters. Now these are movies that have taken place a long time ago, usually like in the 1920s, 30s, I think the 60s might be the latest one that was done. Now a lot of them have had remakes done of the films, which are fine and dandy, but we're focusing on the originals themselves. Okay, so let's go ahead and start with number 10. Number 10 is The Living Dead. Now, there have been tons of zombie movies made, especially here in the past few years, but the concept of The Living Dead originated back in the 1960s. Now, before this, there were concepts of zombies, but they were more like brainwashed people and less corporeal. The idea of the living dead coming back and eating the brains of the living was actually an original concept created by George A. Romero back in the 1960s. Now, I love this idea. I love the original Night of the Living Dead that was made. I love a lot of the other movies that George Romero made. He made a Dawn of the Dead. He made Land of the Dead. He's done a lot of movies over the years. In fact, he's often referred to as the grandfather of zombies, because he was the one who really started the concept of zombies. Moving on to number 9 is King Kong. I remember watching King Kong when I was really little with my grandfather, and it was a huge thing for me because I loved old school monster movies, and it was actually one of the first monster movies I actually saw, and that was referring to the original 1930s version of King Kong, not one of the remakes that was made later on. Shortly after watching the original, I did see a remake that was made back in like the 70s. Actually, no, I'm sorry. I saw a sequel that was made in the 80s. The sequel was made to follow up on the remake that was made in the 70s. Either way, I love King Kong. I love the concept for King Kong. The giant monster movies are one of the things that I love very, very much. So yeah, King Kong was a really big thing for me. Alright, moving on to number 8 is another large movie monster, and that's Godzilla. I'm not talking about the remake Godzilla, even though I did see it in the theaters, and I loved the movie. I loved it a ton. It was a lot of fun to watch it, because I actually went and saw it at a drive-in, and that was just amazing. Seeing that thing in the drive-in was just awesome. But no, I'm actually referring to the original Godzilla, the old, campy, guy in a suit Godzilla, no CGI, poor synchronization from the translation of Japanese to American movies, translation from Japanese to American film, I should say, using the English dubs over the very much Japanese dialogue. It was a lot of fun watching it back when I was a kid. I actually used to watch it with my cousins and with my best friend a lot. Just a huge thing we used to do all the time. Even if we'd seen the movie a dozen times, we'd watch them again and again just because they were that cool to us. And I loved it because even if Godzilla was the bad guy, quote unquote bad guy, I mean he's the giant monster, so when you're destroying the city, whether it's for the good of the people or not, you're considered the bad guy in one respect or another. I always rooted for Godzilla, even if he was considered the villain of the film. Alright, moving on to number 7 is The Invisible Man. Now this is actually a film I have never seen, but I always liked the concept of The Invisible Man. In fact, there was a movie called Hollow Man that was made years ago. It was kind of a remake, kind of a rehashing of the idea of The Invisible Man. And I just always thought it was a cool concept, the idea of something unseen coming after you. That always appealed to me. And I think that's part of the reason why a lot of people like the Predator movies, because he could make himself invisible. So, you know, the concept of an invisible villain in a film always caught my attention. Plus, I like the old school concepts of him with the bandages showing him and the sunglasses. Yeah, it may seem cheesy now, but I thought it was pretty awesome. Alright, moving on to number 6 is The Mummy. Speaking of wraps and bandages, The Mummy is what I call the Egyptian version of a zombie, because that's essentially what it was. It was a corpse that got reanimated, usually in a tomb or some type of major Egyptian exhibit, and typically they were wrapped in bandages for how they preserved the bodies back in Egyptian times. I like the idea of it. Now, this isn't really referring to the zombies that you, or not, excuse me, not zombies, but mummies that you see in like the Brendan Fraser films. Not that there's anything wrong with those, but I'm referring more to the original mummy, the Boris Karloff mummy, the old school mummy. Yeah, moving on to number 5 is The Creature from the Black Lagoon. Now, this is another movie I've never actually seen, but I've always loved what I refer to as Fish Boy. I've always loved the concept of the creature because, to me, Fish Boy looked awesome. He just always looked crazy cool, but the only time that his type of movies would air would be on one of the classic movie channels would air old school horror monster movies really late at night, and I was usually going to bed at that time. So I never got a chance to really watch The Creature from the Black Lagoon, but it was always a movie that I wanted to see because I loved the look of that monster. Okay, moving on to number 4 is one of my personal favorites, and that's the Phantom of the Opera. The original Phantom from the 1920s version of Phantom of the Opera, the role played by Lon Chaney Sr. Now, Lon Chaney Sr. is actually one of my personal favorite actors of all time because he could do things that were amazing. Almost all of his films were done in the 1920s during the silent film era, and he did some stuff with his makeup that is just phenomenal for that time frame. Stuff that today would look, okay, that's a simple thing, I could do that, no problem. But in the 1920s, they were just works of art. They were things that were completely unimaginable with what tools they had back then. In fact, he was so good at his costumes and his makeups that he would keep all of his makeup equipment in an old construction worker's toolbox. He turned that into his makeup kit, and it was just awesome. And I love the look of the original Phantom. I've always kind of been disappointed with how the remakes have been made. I mean, I understand that a lot of the remakes, especially the more recent films, are based off of the Andrew Lloyd Webber's Broadway production. But I always loved the look of the original Phantom. I thought that was one of the most iconic and ghastly looking Phantoms you could have. So that one has always been my personal favorite. Alright, moving on to number 3 is The Wolfman. Now, I say Wolfman and not werewolf because before the concept of werewolf got into movies, Wolfman was the thing. It was really the original cinema werewolf. Ironically enough, he was played by Lon Chaney Jr., the son of the Phantom of the Opera. Lon Chaney Jr. did a lot of creepy movies like his father did, a lot of kind of monster roles per se. He was actually a bigger guy, so the part of the werewolf, or excuse me, the Wolfman, worked well for him because he already had kind of a larger body. Another cool thing that he did was he did another movie. I refer to it as Spider Baby. The movie has like 3 or 4 different names. I think another one's like the strangest story ever told. And it's a movie that's kind of bizarre. It's pretty out there. It features a handful of lesser-known actors and actresses at that time, with the exception of Lon Chaney Jr. But the cool thing was that Jr. did the introduction to the film with his epic raspy voice, and it sounded so cool and so awesome. So definitely, this film that I recommend anyone looking up. It's a hard film to find, but it's definitely worth it if you see it. Okay, moving on to number 2 in the countdown is Frankenstein's Monster. Now, I have to emphasize the term monster in this because a lot of people, myself included, refer to it as just Frankenstein. Frankenstein was the doctor that created the monster, and though in many respects he is a bigger monster himself for doing such a thing, Frankenstein's monster is one that sticks out in everyone's mind, and it's the creature that actually makes it onto this countdown because of its presence. Boris Karloff did an amazing job playing Frankenstein's monster. Just the movements, the overall acting that he did for that part was just amazing. A lot of people have tried to duplicate it, and it doesn't quite work the way that he was able to do it. There's something about these old movies that have their own particular charm that are just amazing. Moving on to number 1, and this is getting into the most classic and most iconic of the classic monsters, is Dracula. And I'm referring to Bela Lugosi's Dracula, not one of the God knows how many remakes of Dracula that there have been. Not that there's anything wrong with them. I love the fact that there are people that like to redo Dracula and rehash the idea. For example, Christopher Lee, who is most known now for his roles in the Star Wars movies and Lord of the Rings and other films, he actually played Dracula several times. I believe he has the record of like 13 or 14 times playing the role of Dracula. Now this is for a smaller film company called Hammer Films. But, you know, he's played the role a ton of times. And I like the dedication to the role, because that's always been cool to me. But Bela Lugosi is the original, and he is the one that really sticks out as the iconic Dracula. In fact, when people see Dracula, that's the first one that comes to my mind, and I think that's what comes to a lot of other people's minds, is the old Bela Lugosi Dracula. Another good one for Dracula is the one that Gary Oldman did in Bram Stoker's Dracula. That was a good one too. I liked the movie a lot. It's definitely a 90s film. It has the whole 90s feel to it. Very kind of, you know, hokey at certain points, but still a good movie. But still, hands down to this day, Bela Lugosi is the Dracula, the best Dracula ever. So that's going to wrap up my countdown for this one, the classic movie monsters. Let me know what you guys think. If there's a movie monster that you guys love that fits into the classic category, I'm talking about something that happened, let's try to keep it, you know, 60s, 70s, and earlier. I don't really like doing the remakes too much. They're fun and all, and I enjoy watching them, but again, the whole premise of this was to keep it classic, old school. So let me know what you guys think in the comments below. Be sure to like, share, favorite this video, subscribe to my channel for more videos that I've done. Keep your eyes open for more promotions I'm going to be doing. I plan on doing a contest if I can get to 100 subscribers, so please definitely subscribe to this channel and promote subscriptions to other people too. Alright guys, that's going to do it for this video. You have a nice day.